You are listening to the Tricorder transmissions.
Drawing Trek, episode 32, covering Gold Key Comics, issue 33.
And now, here are Jeff and Ian.
Welcome back to the Tricorder Transmissions. This is our coverage of Gold Key Comics, issue number 33, The Choice. I am Jeff Hewlett, and with me is my Gold Key co-chair, Mr. Ian Adams.
Hi.
Hello there, Mr. Adams.
How's it going, Jeff?
Well, it's going all right. It's going all right. We're back to talk about yet another very interesting, and I'm not going to flip the cards yet, but there's a lot to talk about with this issue. I'm excited to get into this one.
Boy, this sure is, and I'm excited too. Like, this one is, so much to talk about. I don't want to flip my hand either, but
yeah, let's get into it a little bit here. We'll talk about the writer is Alan Moniz again. He was primarily a comic book author working with Whitman Publishing, which is the parent company of Gold Key, in the 60s and 70s, and we talked about him a little bit before because he wrote issue number 30, Death of a Star, which we already covered not long ago, and he wrote this one, but these are the only two that he wrote for the Star Trek series, interestingly enough. This is his last comic with us. So in addition to that, he wrote some comic strips for Bugs Bunny, and I think Tweety and Sylvester, and a couple of other, Mighty Samson, and a few other different comic strips. But he had quite a little career going there.
Yeah.
We still have Alberto Giolitti, by the way. Did you have something you wanted to say about Moniz?
Oh, no, just he had a knack, even though we only have a sample size of 2, he had a knack for interesting Star Trek comics.
He certainly
Love
did.
them or hate them, like, they were really interesting.
Yeah, both of them work well. I don't want to talk about this one too much yet. I keep almost doing it, but
I know, me too.
The Death of a Star was, for me, a head scratcher. It was interesting, was a head scratcher. There's a lot of strange choices in that one, but he seemed to have a good handle on the Trek characters, which I really liked.
Yeah,
and I think that carries over into this issue as well.
Oh, totally.
And this came out in September of 1975, so they're really cranking out these Gold Keys at this point. There no more 3-month, 4-month, 5-month gaps in between. You know, they're getting them out at a regular interval. We're still the short format though.
Yeah,
26 pages instead of the initial 32 that we used to get. So Gold Key's up to 25 cents now, and you're getting less comic than you used to for a dime.
Yeah,
or 12 cents. So bad on you, Gold Key, for ripping us off this far. So star date
you
for
bastard.
this one. Oh, unbelievable. Star date 1701.02. Again, sometime in the 2260s.
Can we just comment on that real quick? 1701.
I know, isn't that great? Isn't that great? And 1701.02 may give you a little bit of insight into something that happens in the comic, and you see it on the cover, actually. There's 2 1701s on this cover. So I guess that's a perfect segue to get into the cover of this issue. And the first thing that I really want to point out about this cover, I already said there's 2 Enterprises, and I am looking forward to the day where Gold Key no longer impresses me by having things right. But I love that the Enterprise call sign is right. There's their designation NCC 1701 on the cover. So that to me is great, and that just gives you a little bit of a hint as to some of the good stuff you're going to get through this issue. There's a lot of really good Trek references to the original series in here that are pretty accurate.
Totally. Plus, like, George Wilson, who did the cover again, he really could draw the Enterprise. I mean, 2 views in one cover, and they both look just perfect.
Yes, they do. And the proportions are excellent. The nacelles look great. There's some really good detail work on both models. Especially, I like the shuttle bay on the one that's flying away from us. Looks really nice. Some really good detail on that.
And I've always liked that view, the one that's firing on the other Enterprise.
Yep.
I've always liked that back view of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
It's Matt Jeffries could make a model that was very photographable. If I can coin a word, from almost any angle, but that one right there, by far my favorite.
Yeah, it's very majestic. Very, it gives you, for a Star Trek fan, it gives you a sense of pride looking at the ship from that. It looks so, I don't know the right word for it is, but it looks so imposing.
Yeah,
and it feels big from that
angle. And it feels real.
It does. It really does. And so Ian actually also just mentioned that the one Enterprise is firing on the other one. So we have two Enterprises fighting each other here, which is something we haven't seen before in Gold Key. I don't think we've ever seen more than one Federation flagship or flagship starship fighting another one, or even two in the same issue, I don't think.
No, and I'll say that I did get a little excited when I just first saw that image, because the image of a Constitution class ship firing on another Constitution class ship it just draws the eye if you're like any sort of Trekkie, right? And so before I even got to the bottom where it says, Kirk versus Kirk, a duel to save the universe from oblivion, before I even got to that, like my eye was just drawn to the two ships, and I was like, oh my God, are we going to see like Starfleet ships fighting each other? What's going on? This is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And the cover, that I think that's the best element of the cover. The two Kirks at the bottom who are appearing like, I guess they're fencing each other with padding on.
Yeah.
That kind of threw me off a little bit. I do like the two faces in the background.
Totally. Yeah. Those are really great. Even if they do look like they're Kennedys.
They do. They don't. Neither one of them looks like Shatner to me. I know it's supposed to be Kirk versus Kirk in the background, but the thing that grabs me about those two faces is I did not notice them at first.
Oh, really?
I was so busy looking at the two Enterprises and then the two fencing Kirks at the bottom. Then my eyes kind of moved back up, and I realized that there were two faces in the background. The first time I looked at this. So interesting, different levels to this cover.
Yeah,
in my mind. And
this is maybe I'd say in the top 3 covers, but I haven't actually ranked them of all the ones that we've seen so far.
That's something we should do an episode on one of these days.
Yeah, I'm kind of saving ranking until we're through the whole series, but boy, and who we should get on for that.
I don't think he reads the comics, but it would be interesting to see if we can get him to do it.
Well, if nothing else, let's just get him on to rate the covers.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
We should compile all the covers. Now, another thing I was scratching my head about, and I kind of like when they do stuff like this, the tagline at the bottom that you already read, a duel to save the universe from oblivion.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know which duel that is referring to. Are they referring to the fencing duel? Are they referring to the two Enterprises fighting each other? Which one
or
is
the staring contest in the background?
Yeah, we don't know. And I would like to think it's the two Enterprises.
Right.
We know which one it is, but we're not going to tell you guys yet.
No.
But we were hoping that it's
monsters.
the two Enterprises. Vegetable men. That's one way to get Ian to laugh. If anybody ever sees Ian in real life, just shake his hand and say vegetable men. And you'll get a hearty laugh. So
it's the best.
That was one of the best references in Gold Key so far to an alien creature. Anything else you want to say before we move on from the cover? Anything else on this thing that you want to shout out? I mean, some star. I think it looks like two black holes in the background.
Yeah. No. The only thing that I would have to add is just more gushing that I've already been doing. This is just a great cover.
It is.
But I'm anxious to get to the content of the comic.
All right, so we are going to move on to the actual content of the comic and start talking about the teaser page. So if anybody wants to tune out now and read this comic before we move on, please do so. We'd be more than happy to have you come back and listen along with us as we talk through the story. So we're going to start talking about the teaser page in 3, 2, 1. So, another teaser page that kind of half matches something we saw on the cover.
Right.
So that we have a third option for teaser pages. We have teaser pages that are a complete recreation of the cover, some that are completely different than the cover, and then some that are kind of half and half.
Right.
And this one is half and half, right? We got the two fencing Kirks, but one of them is laying on the ground looking defeated, while the other one is standing above him. But we don't know which one is which at this point. We assume the one on the bottom is our Kirk.
Well, yeah, and like we're only assuming that the one standing up is Kirk because of the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because there's no indication in the text, and we're only getting a back view, and the colors are different. So, like, you know, you would be forgiven if you thought, maybe that's just some guy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And, you know, in my eyes, it looks to me like the standing guy has slightly different proportions than the Kirk that's laying on the ground. Like, he looks a bit stockier to me.
Yeah. You know, like if I'm going to give Giolitti some credit, which I feel like he did, apropos of our conversation in the last episode, I did some research and discovered that he unfortunately passed away in 1993. So we will unfortunately never get that interview. But I would say that look at the picture that he's drawing here, right? Like he's got Kirk, his upper torso is towards the fading point, as you would call it if you're drawing, right?
Yep.
The vanishing point. So that part you can expect to be smaller, right? Whereas the Kirk that's standing up, spoiler alert, it's Kirk that's standing up, appears a little stockier, but like that I could totally forgive as just a matter of perspective, and I mean that in the artistic sense, not in the sort of philosophical sense. So I'm very forgiving of that.
Well, that explains it. It's good enough for me. I'll take it. I'll take it. So now the masks that they're wearing, I realize they're supposed to be futuristic versions of fencing masks, so they're not the mesh, the sieve type masks that we wear today, but they look to me like they would fog up really quickly.
Yeah.
Since they're solid plastic or glass, I don't know how well you'd be able to breathe, number one, in those. They almost look like half space helmets.
Yeah, almost. It's almost like Anbo Jitsu, but like not quite.
Nice reference. Yeah, and if this is some sort of fight to the death, why are they wearing these pads? That's another thing that kind of threw me off.
Right.
If they
and who really duels to the death with foils? I mean,
yeah, no, nobody. Well, I think you can't see them in this image, but on the cover, you can clearly see both of them have phasers in their hands as well, but they're choosing to fight with the swords.
Yeah, and curiously, the swords are each in their left hand. But as far as we know, Kirk and indeed William Shatner, and even if we're going to go so far as to say Chris Pine, all right-handed.
Mm-hmm. So we have to wonder who this other Kirk might be.
Yeah.
We're not sure. Well, we'll have to read into the issue to get to it, but let's go through this wall of text they have in the upper right-hand corner of this page. And this, in my mind, this is one of the stranger lead-in text blocks that we've had in Gold Key.
In fact, before we move on with the summary of the rest of the issue, can we stop after you read that and just go over this page?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty more that I want to say about this page. We could do that first if you wish.
Oh, no, please read it first, because let's provide context for the listeners. They're waiting for it.
Well, I don't know how much context this is going to provide, but I'm going to try to get through this without messing up. It's quite long and dense, so hold on. Bear with me. It reads, "You've all heard the story of the lady and the tiger." I don't think that I have, though. I'm not sure what that is. Well, just suppose for a moment that instead of the lady or the tiger, behind those doors were the divergent courses of infinite universes, and that one man has been placed in front of these doors to decide which path the universe shall follow. Then imagine that your exact twin shows up and tells you to stop supposing, because this is exactly what is going to happen. Now you have an idea of how Captain Kirk feels in, drumroll, The Choice.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I guess that really does kind of sum up what happens in this issue in a concise way. It doesn't really help you to understand it anymore.
Yeah, so we're basically done. You want to just button this up?
Yeah, you want to go get a cup of coffee?
All right, yeah.
Well, you know what? I have one more question, though. Before we wrap it up, I have one question. So we want to talk about this page and everything that's going on this page, and I'll kick us off by saying, where in the hell are they? They're on the ship somewhere, but where? Where is this engineering?
Well, can I get a little spoilery?
Sure.
Because that's totally engineering. Because one thing that I was noticing throughout the issue is that the sets that Giolitti drew were all like really, really spot on. And there's this one point where they're down in engineering.
Yep.
You know, where they're fighting. And it's obviously engineering, but then he had to draw some extra machinery because, you know, they're on views that you didn't necessarily see. Because there was basically like 2 views of engineering that you ever got.
Yeah,
right. One from the door, the entrance, and then one from I would say the if you've got the sort of reactor cathedral thing, if you're looking at that, then to the right of that, looking at the bulkhead, and those are basically the 2 views that you got to see.
The standard views, but I would add that if you really want to see a lot of engineering, I would recommend the Ultimate Computer.
Oh yeah,
I think you get a few other alternate views of engineering in that episode that you don't normally get to see.
Yeah,
that
very true. Very
perhaps, thinking there's one other one where we have a little bit more in engineering. Changeling?
Maybe the Changeling.
I know Nomad flies around in there a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, and then there's also Court Martial.
Oh, perhaps
with Ben Finnegan when they duel.
Right. Oh yeah. Because that's where he finds him, right? Hiding in engineering, right?
Right, down in the lower decks.
Yeah. Right. So there's plenty of, but the Giolitti did have a job on his hands, though.
Boy, he sure did.
To draw some of this, but I'm gonna definitely point out some panels in this issue that I thought he did spectacular jobs recreating the TOS Enterprise interior. I was amazed.
Oh, absolutely. This was a standout issue in terms of artwork of the Enterprise.
Absolutely. So the machinery in the background here that I was kind of scratching my head at, I just wanted to throw it out there to start the conversation. This is really weird looking stuff. Most of it to me doesn't look like stuff you'd see on the Enterprise, but a little bit of it does.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's like you can totally imagine like exactly where this equipment would be in the engine room.
Yeah, based on the default views that we've seen most of the time, right?
Right. Like, we know it's not that big console wall with the ladder through it. We know it's not on the cathedral. We know it's not in the alcove. We know it's not in the engineering office on the second deck.
The angle you never see.
Right. Like, there's only one place where this equipment could be.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I think the mechanism over Kirk and the bottom, his right shoulder, there's that pinkish gray machine. That looks the most TOS-ish to me out of all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other ones kind of look kind of Buck Rogers-y.
Yeah. There's definitely some other sci-fi influence going on here.
Mm-hmm.
With that green one on the absolute right and the blue on the absolute left of the pages, they both look like they definitely came from someplace else, but they still look pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he definitely put a lot of effort into drawing a lot of detail on those that he might not have needed to draw for this. I mean,
yeah, not really. He could have been... Yeah, he could have been really sparse, made excessive use of shadows even, and still gotten away with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he could have drawn, 3 or 4 machines that look a lot like that second one that I said looks very TOS because it's very plain looking. He could have just done that, but
yeah, and that's what the people on TOS, in the set department did so often was just, oh, we built one of these, let's build another one.
Just line them up.
Yep.
Line them up. What else did you want to throw out there about this page?
Okay, so the Lady and the Tiger is actually the Lady or the Tiger.
Oh.
Which was a short story written by Frank Stockton in 1882. So at the time, that story wasn't even 100 years old. And if you want to sort of think about, like, because the sentence is, you've all heard the story of the Lady and the Tiger, right?
Yep.
And I would bet, like, you could ask your parents, hey, you know the story of the Lady or the Tiger? They would probably know it, just in the same way that we know stuff like, The Wizard of Oz, right? Which was written about, a little under 100 years from where we are. And assuming my math is right. So the Lady or the Tiger is this story where you've got this king who, some of his ideas are great. Some of them are like just sadistic. And one of the things that he does is whenever someone's brought to trial, he does kind of like how they did, the old witch trials, like, let's drown her, and if she's still alive, then we know she's a witch, right?
Yes.
So this whole trial by ordeal thing, right? With guilt or innocence decided by the result of the choice. And so what he did is whenever a person was accused of a crime, they were brought to an area where they must choose one of 2 doors.
Mm-hmm.
Behind one door is a lady whom the king has deemed appropriate for the accused, and the other is a fierce, hungry tiger. So it's, pleasure or pain, basically, right? In a very sexist way, but it was 1882. So they're all soundproofed. You can't hear what's
I was gonna say
behind each one, right? Because
I would just go listen to the door and see what I heard.
Right. And then if the person accused chooses the door with the lady behind it, then he's innocent, but also has to immediately marry her.
Oh.
But if he chooses the door with the tiger behind it, he's deemed guilty and is immediately devoured by it. So, so it's this whole kind of choice of something positive versus something negative, and the story in basically all of its adaptations always ends with a question. And so I leave it with all of you: which came out of the open door, the lady or the tiger?
Mm-hmm.
Right, as in which choice did he choose? And that's where it comes to this issue, right? Is because there's a choice. In fact, that's the title of the issue. So that's basically where that comes from.
Huh. Well, thank you for that. I had not ever read that story, so Glad to know that. Next time I talk to my mother, I'll ask her if she knows that.
I would be not surprised if she didn't know it, but I would find it interesting if she didn't know it.
Okay, fair enough. I will let you know what she says next time I talk to her. And any listeners out there, let us know if you've heard of the story.
Yeah.
Of the Lady or the Tiger. That would be interesting for me to know. And let us know, well, if you would be so kind as to let us know how old you are. If you're a younger person or if you're an older person, let us know so that we can kind of get a little demographic action here. Who knows the story and who doesn't.
We can plot it out on a graph. It'll be great.
Yeah, Ian's good with numbers and graphs. We'll leave that up to Ian to do. One other question that I wanted to throw out, this is lighter hearted. The fencing gear, the pads, do they keep that on the Enterprise, or do you think they replicated it, or?
Well, we know they didn't have replicators back then.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that even in the Next Generation, Picard had his own set that he kept in his quarters, even though he only used them in the early seasons and never again.
Swore that there was at least one, if not two, episodes of TOS where Kirk requested clothing from a certain time period.
There was
Patterns of Force for sure.
Yep, and then also Chicago Mobs of the 20s. What was the name of the episode?
Oh, Piece of the Action.
Thank you.
Yes. So where did those clothes come from?
Well, presumably they have a really advanced stewards department on the ship.
So they ordered up some fencing gear.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, you know what?
But I would say that they probably already had it on the ship. I mean, because they've got all kinds of athletic gear, and we've seen the gymnasium in a couple episodes, and they had, some Starfleet branded kind of athletic wear, but we only got to see just two small rooms of their gymnasium on a ship that was 680 meters long. That's I would bet that the gymnasium was a little bit bigger than that to accommodate a crew of 430.
Potentially. We'll have to. Well, actually, there's a little bit more of a clue in this issue to talk a little bit more about the recreation facilities on the ship. I'm not going to go with that right now. I'm going to hold off until we get to that point in the issue.
No, but I feel like we should rush towards that as fast as we can. You want to get going?
Yes, let's get going. So there is a captain's log to kick us off here as we start on the first page of the issue. It says, Captain's log, stardate 170102. After a hectic 2-week leave on the resort planet Lido, the Enterprise crew was immediately assigned to a new high-priority destination. And it goes on to say, our orders are to proceed to the vast and little-known quadrant Mark I in the capacity of scientific expedition. Continuing on the next panel, it keeps going. Recent developments in para-astronomy have pinpointed a hotbed of telltale radiation there. Scientists now believe this area to be the site of the Big Bang, or in other words, the birthplace of the universe. Ding. So, the Enterprise is flying through a very interesting looking part of space here in this page. There's a lot of very cool looking stars and planetoids and nebula looking things in the background here to look at. And as they're going through, they are looking through these gases and cooled and formed stars, planets, and moons. As they're going through, they approach the region. Kirk asks Mr. Spock if they're going to encounter any unusual or weird effects while crossing through an area of space that he says has not changed since the dawn of time. Spock explains that they are likely to encounter something he calls primitive matter, which will be essentially unpredictable to their instruments on the ship.
Yeah. Maybe we should call it proto-matter.
Good call. Good call. They didn't call it that, but that would have been a better choice of words. At that precise moment, a red alert goes out across the ship, and they are recalled to the bridge. Sulu tells them that the red alert was an automatically generated response by the ship's computer, because somehow all of the ship's scanners simultaneously went dead, putting the computer into an alert state. So Uhura reports that the sensors are also inoperable, and Mr. Chekhov is unable to locate any masses or anything else on the screen anymore. Kirk asks Spock for some analysis, but he does not currently have anything that he can give him. And Mr. Scott reports that the dilithium crystals in the ship have also ceased to function. They've gone cold, according to him. Spock suggests that the natural laws may not pertain in that area of space. And in true Spock-like fashion, in response to the question by Captain Kirk, do you have any idea where here is? Spock says, based on rudimentary facts and a quick computation of the figures available, Captain, I would say we are precisely nowhere. Dun, dun, dun. So we're going to stop here on page number 8. And God, there's a lot to digest already in a short amount of pages. So very happy to report, and this is in addition to something that Ian and Heather and I were talking about on an animated series episode a while back. Now we have 3 resort shore leave destinations instead of just 2. We now have the resort planet Lido or Lido or however you want to. I would love to know more about this. Unfortunately, we're not going to get much more information about it, but now we know we have 3. So we have the shore leave planet Lido and the one from the Man Trap. What was that one called?
Wrigley's Pleasure Planet.
Wrigley's Pleasure Planet. Yeah. I don't know, which one would you rather go to? The one we don't know much about, the resort planet Lido, the shore leave one, which we know a lot about, and the one with a really weird name, Wrigley's Pleasure Planet. Almost sounds like an adult location, doesn't it?
Yeah, it almost does. I gotta say though, I would be all about Ryza. I mean,
well, we don't have Ryza yet. We're still in TOS. We have to go with what we have.
Well. Yeah, I'd still go with Ryza, though. I mean, it still existed.
Come on.
Right?
We haven't discovered it yet.
What are you talking about? The Enterprise discovered it in season 1.
Captain Kirk was not there. We're in TOS.
Because he wasn't born yet.
I know that. Well, they haven't discovered it yet. We're in TOS. We're in the middle of Gold Key. You don't have that choice yet, Ian. You have to pick one of the ones we have access to.
Well, then obviously I would go with Wrigley's Pleasure Planet. Because I don't want to get... killed by robots.
Fair enough.
And we know nothing about the resort planet of Lido, which is probably just like a whole bunch of hotels and stuff.
All we do know is that it was a hectic 2-week leave, so that doesn't sound very relaxing.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, a hectic leave.
Like for me, a hectic vacation is like, oh my God, I didn't have Wi-Fi for 2 weeks. You know, like
you need a vacation from your vacation.
Do you suppose? Yeah, what do you suppose the Enterprise crew would consider hectic?
Oh, I would consider what happened on the shore leave planet both times pretty hectic.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sad to say that, well, this is the one point in this entire issue that I can say that I was disappointed by the lazy naming of something. I thought the quadrant of Mark 1 was pretty bad. It felt like we were back with Planet Question Mark to me. I really was hoping for a better name for this area of space that they're going to, that is the site of the Big Bang, which I would think that there'd be something cool. Like, I love the Great Barrier, the kind of it sounds so majestic and big and ominous, the Great Barrier, and what's beyond it, you know? This just sounds like Mark 1.
It's like, I guess we just haven't charted that area of the galaxy yet. That's what it sounded like, basically. Like, Mark 1, though, I mean, if you're going to mark off quadrants in the galaxy, you would think you would make Mark 1, assuming that you're going to go with that kind of idiotic nomenclature, you would assume that Mark 1 would be the quadrant that you're in, right?
Potentially.
Like in the same way that when humans, separated, later on in the series, of course, separated the galaxy into 4 quadrants.
And they all had
the
names.
Alpha quadrant. Yeah, the Alpha quadrant, the first one, was the one that Earth was in. And, we can get into debates about, it's right on the border of the Alpha and Beta quadrants. But, okay. But Deep Space Nine basically said it was the Alpha quadrant. So, that bugged me.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit on the lazy side. That, and I know you have a lot to say about the pseudoscience and bizarre science. And para-astronomy kind of threw me for a loop as well. What in the heck is para-astronomy?
Right. Is that like looking for the stellar equivalent of Bigfoot? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, paranormal astronomy. We're looking for mythic creatures. Well, actually, if you were to say that, some people don't believe in the theory of the Big Bang, right? People don't believe it. So maybe this is para-astronomy. Maybe they are looking for, that mythic white whale in space,
Yeah, but really those would be like cosmologists.
True. Well, maybe they had to come up with a crafty name for what they were doing, I suppose. But that kind of threw me because sometimes they use the correct terminology, as you've pointed out in the past. And sometimes they just make stuff up.
Yeah. Well, in this case, though, where they're headed is like the origin of the Big Bang.
Right.
And so, first of all, wasn't that where they went to in the Magics of Magus 2?
Yes.
Right. So we've already been there. And that was what, 4 years before this? 3 years before this?
That's a good question. I have to look at that. It could very well be.
Either way, it was definitely before 1975.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was. I think it was 73.
So that part was a little odd, but also a little cool.
Yeah.
Right? Because at least in the Magics of Magus 2, the Enterprise was the first to go there. Right? And here, all they're saying is that it's little explored. They're not saying no one's ever explored it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not saying the Enterprise hasn't previously explored it. They're just saying it's little explored. So I kind of took that in my head canon, even though I'm not treating this at all as canon, as they were revisiting that region, and this time not getting accosted by a Satan.
Well, yes, and actually to lend a little more potential validity, it even says in the second panel of the captain's log that it is a vast and little known. Mm-hmm. So maybe they'd been there before, but in another part of the vastness is where they found Satan and all of his buddies.
Turns out space is big.
Yeah, and maybe they're going to, they didn't know at the time that that telltale radiation was there, and they've been probing that area, and they know where not to go now because they've been to the other area before and say, well, okay, well, we know how hard it was to get back out of there, so let's not go there again. Let's go to this other part of this quadrant. But they didn't call it Quadrant Mark 1 in the Magics of Magus 2.
True.
So maybe they didn't name it
because they had a little more sense.
Potentially. But I'll tell you one thing though. There's definitely some I don't want to say correlation, but there's definitely some commonality between, now that you mentioned the Magics of Magus 2, and especially the first and second pages of this story. To me, the artwork, I remember the artwork in Magics of Magus 2 was very trippy and very cool looking as the ship was flying around. And I think the artwork in these couple of pages is also really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the area of space that they're flying through. They're very colorful and detailed, and there's just so much to take in.
Absolutely. And you remember gosh, I can't remember the name of the previous issue that this guy wrote.
It was Death of a Star.
Death of a Star, right? Yeah, the one with the woman who was actually the star incarnate, and she was dying, and all that. I remember, like, in that episode, we also commented so much on the space art, and this was just like, I feel like just the writer whose name I've forgotten already. I apologize. I feel like he had put in his script when he sent to Alberto Giolitti, like, we're going to have a whole bunch of space stuff going on, and here's the general rundown of the space stuff we're going to see. And he knocked it out of the park in the previous issue, the previous script that he had sent to Giolitti. This one, though, he was like, you know what, though? That was really cool. Let's do more of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why we got 2 1/3 pages of that in this issue.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of it. And all of it is exceptionally good in my mind. I really like every single panel.
Absolutely. Even though it gets a little weird, right? Because you've got all, like, just in panel 1 on page 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 planets in immediate view. Like,
yep,
that would be raising hell with any sort of sense of orbital mechanics or anything like that. But it just looks cool.
It does,
and I'm so for it. But so even though this was presumably where they previously had gone to in the Magus 2 and are returning to it again, the premise of that this is a spot in the galaxy where the universe was birthed. I have to raise issue with, just in terms of, like, real world physics. Like, I hate to be that guy, but somebody has to bring it up, right? Like, our galaxy is not that old. It certainly was not around in the 13.4 billion years ago, 14 billion years ago, if we're going to round up. And, if you think about the way that, because as they continue on the next page, the explanation, which, boy, that's another thing. So Spock is, because it's Science Officer Spock's log.
Yeah, and I want to point that out too really quickly while we're there. That is the first in a chain of several accurate references to TOS that we haven't typically seen in Gold Key before. I don't even know if he's ever been called Science Officer Spock in Gold Key.
I don't think he ever has.
No. So thumbs up. Thank you, Alan Moniz, for getting that right. And everything else you're going to get right in a little bit here once we get to it. But carry on.
Yeah, but in Spock's log there, it's he says, the Big Bang Theory states simply that all the matter in the universe was once an incomprehensibly compact ball of subatomic particles and waves forming a single primal atom. And until that last phrase, I was on board. But then, no, it's not a single atom. The idea is that, like, okay, so we know from Einstein. Yeah, we're going there. We know from Einstein that energy and matter are equivalent, right? You can convert one to the other and back and forth.
Yep.
The idea of a singularity comes straight out of Einstein, right? Like, they wouldn't have even considered that if not for, I want to say it was specific relativity that he went off on that. So it's not that everything was down to a single atom and then that atom somehow magically, like, started replicating. Right. It's that all of the energy that makes up our entire universe, including all of the matter, right? Energy that had converted into matter, was all in this single spot.
Right.
So it's not an atom. It was all the energy in this really, 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 really tiny spot. So little bit of a nitpick there. But he's generally right with for some reason, it exploded.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then as time passed, the gases cooled and condensed into the dominant forms of matter and all that. That's totally good.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 20 billion years or so, the blast will expend itself and the universe will begin to collapse. Now, this was written in 1975. Edwin Hubble had figured out in what was that, the late 20s, early 30s of the 20th century, just so we're clear for future listeners, that the universe was expanding.
Right.
And that it was not just expanding, but accelerating. Right. And it was only by, the 1980s that we really had the solid sort of calculational foundation of that. But the observation had been done half a century before this issue was written and had been widely accepted in the scientific community by the time this was written. So I get the idea that it's a really kind of satisfying idea that the universe, blows up and then everything cools down and then it retracts again into another singularity and then blows up again. But turns out everything that we know about the universe and have known since even before this comic was written points to that not being the case. So, because in fairness, they didn't know anything about dark energy or dark matter or any of those sort of frontier of astrophysics things yet, concepts. But still, the fact that the universe isn't going to collapse back in on itself, they would have known in 1975.
Maybe the author didn't know.
Perhaps.
Or maybe he was just writing this to make it sound good.
Also a good hypothesis.
Well, and I figure if you pick a number like 20 billion years or so,
yeah,
that the universe will begin to collapse. That's a while. I don't think that's panic inducing for anyone who might be reading this. Even anyone who's reading this in the distant future.
That's still just over 6 billion years from now, which is way longer than any of us who will ever listen to this.
Well, unless we somehow broadcast this into space and it just keeps going and going ad infinitum. And when the universe collapses and re-expands itself, someone will listen to it in an alternate universe. So it's entirely possible. One can hope.
One can only hope. But by the third page, we start seeing interiors of the Enterprise. And even in that first panel 3 on page 5, page 4 for everyone else, if they're not counting the cover as the thing.
It does.
That looks like the briefing room without the table.
They certainly are.
The chairs are the chairs from TOS.
Yep.
Giolitti's got it down by now. And that is just your first taste of the glory of his Enterprise interiors in this one. They're really, really good.
I absolutely. I only thing I nitpick is the film projector they're using.
Yeah. But, that's the same kind of thing as Kirk would occasionally say on the show, run the tape.
But other than that, yeah, this actually looks to me like it's got a reel on it.
Yep.
Where you can put the film. It's got a container.
Yeah, it's like a real cartridge.
And it's definitely got a lens projecting light onto a screen where I think everything we saw in TOS was like a rear projection.
Yeah.
Or like a flat screen type.
Absolutely.
Monitor. Or a CRT even. There's sometimes you'll see the CRT monitors floating around. But never a projector. So interesting that he chose to draw a projector there.
Yeah.
And Scotty's head is almost in the way of the screen there He's almost getting. You could have seen his little shadow on the screen there. Kirk probably told him to move over a little bit.
Yeah, that's because he's a jerk.
So one other thing interesting I wanted to point out, since you gave us a nice scientific explanation of some of the issues with this the Big Bang Theory area they're going to. I found it fascinating that now they're two disconnected writers, but the last issue that we just talked about, they stumble onto what was said to be the secret of life, or the genesis of life, right? Inside of an interior of a planet. Now, in the very next issue, they're at the place where the genesis of the universe. So they just solved in 2 issues of a comic book both the mystery of life and the mystery of the universe. So they don't have anything else to do after this, in my opinion. They can all retire.
It. Yeah. After this is just like, keep the Klingons from crapping on our crops. That's basically it.
Yeah, pretty much it. I mean, this is 2 heavy issues right in a row. But well, let's keep moving here through this section, because there's so much more to unpack, boy. And let me we'll flip the page.
But I just want to point out again, the interiors, right? It's not just that briefing room. Flip the page. We've got.
I was just about to do that.
I thought we. I agree. I thought we had stopped on page 8. Yeah,
we did. I'm talking about page 6. We were on page 5.
Oh, okay. I'm
talking about page 6. So we've got not only do we have the briefing room, we have a really good hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, the last 2 panels of the bridge are pretty much spot on.
Finally, the bridge.
The only thing that's wrong.
The colors?
No. Sulu's in the wrong place.
Oh!
Sulu should be on the left-hand side of the console. He's in Chekhov's seat. They're reversed.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
But Kirk's chair is right. The console, the pilot's console, pilot navigation's console is great.
Yep.
That looks right. When you see the shot of Kirk looking at Sulu and you see into the background, even that station is right.
Yep, absolutely. And here's the level of detail that so impressed me on this. So in the corridor, panel 3 on page 6.
Yep.
So it's not just that it curves, right? Like we all knew that it curved, except for Giolitti in like the first 10 issues. Look above Kirk's word balloon, where he's saying, "To stations, everyone, this is a red alert, let's go."
Yep.
You can see these, in this case, I think it's bright blue, maybe bright gray, tetrahedrons, right? Those are the same things that are in the corridor sets on the Enterprise. You've got these, each segment of the corridor had these little things that would jut out of the ceiling, but only go down as far as, a little bit above everyone's heads. And they had these tetrahedral shapes in them that were just reflective metal stuff. Like, he even did that, even though it was mostly covered by Kirk's word balloon and wasn't even going to be seen by anyone. This guy got it this time. Bravo, Giolitti.
Oh, unbelievable. And before I talk about anything else related to the dialogue in this section, quickly flipping to the next page, 7 and even 8, looking at Uhura's console, great.
Yep.
The shot of from the next panel 2 on page 7, you see Kirk leaning over the console, talking to Chekhov.
Over the astrogator?
Yep. You look and you can see the view screen. You can see the consoles next to it, which is a view of the bridge we rarely ever saw.
Very true.
In the show. In the next panel, you see a wide shot of the bridge. You see where Spock is. You see the little monitor that he looks into. I mean, and then you get a close-up of Spock's panel.
Yeah, and it's still good.
I'm telling you, he did his homework.
Yeah.
on this. And you know what? It even makes it better. And I know everybody's probably getting tired of hearing us talk about this so far, but the dialogue through this sequence is spot on in my mind. This sounds just like something you would have heard in TOS. And thank God that Spock finally sounds like Spock.
Yes.
In it back on panel page 6, panel 2, Spock is answering Kirk's question, and the dialogue here by Spock sounds exactly like something Spock would have said. Not even remotely questionable to me. Indeed, Captain, we are bound to encounter some primitive states of matter whose effects should prove highly unpredictable. Yeah. I couldn't have written a better Spock. And there's a couple more things that he says in here that are great too. Everybody else seems to be pretty much dead on as well. There's some other great stuff in here. The alert that calls them to the bridge. Captain Kirk reports to the bridge immediately. I mean, that's something you would have heard. Yep. The only thing that's off in here, in my mind, is Scotty.
Yes, I was just going to comment on that because he still talks like this weird, like...
Jamaican?
Yeah, with his whole Mon thing.
He says
Scottish
Mon
people
twice.
Don't say Mon.
No.
And
no.
Plus, also in panel 3 on page 6, poor form on the colorist for not coloring him red.
Red. He was red in the previous page.
Yep. But and then there's one other thing, and it's on page 8 where we last left off. As great as that shot of the Enterprise is in the final panel, as great as that shot of Spock is in the previous panel, as great as that shot of Uhura is when she's, describing that they ran out of space to Kirk. Then there's Captain, are you there, Mon? And then ahoy, Scotty.
Scotty would never call the captain Mon or man.
Yeah.
And then Kirk saying ahoy, Scotty in return is a little bit weird too.
Yeah, you don't say ahoy to someone who is on your own ship. Like if,
I agree. Yes, you're right.
Okay, yeah, they run fast and loose with Navy traditions on Star Trek, but that is one thing you don't do. You wouldn't even in Kirk's case, he wouldn't even say "I, Scotty," because he's not a subordinate to Scotty. It just ahoy, Scotty. That's like saying, Scotty, you're on another ship or a planet or something. Ahoy. Yep. Like, no, don't do that. Bad Kirk. Smack his nose with a newspaper.
I think some of the other dialogue in this redeems that small nitpick in my mind. So
absolutely.
There are some there's a reference to the ship's computer, which I love. That's something they always refer to the ship's computers and TOS. Very rarely have we ever heard anything about the ship's computers in Gold Key so far. The scanners.
Yep.
The scanners went dead, so we always have scanner problems.
Which was apparently no surprise.
No, not at all.
Although I will say, just one more nitpick. Okay. Ditto on sensors is not
ditto,
something that Uhura would say.
No, yeah, that's a good nitpick for sure. But I'm going to say that we finally have everybody in this issue.
Yeah.
All the major players, all the Enterprise crew members. Although Dr. McCoy is not named, you do see him, but he's not named in this. And you see Nurse Chapel, but she's not named.
Yeah.
But everybody is visually represented finally in this issue.
Yeah, boy, big change from last issue, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm very happy about that. So yeah, I feel redeemed.
Right.
After the last issue felt so off.
Yeah. Plus,
from a continuity standpoint.
Plus, we've even got Scotty saying the dilithium crystals have gone cold.
Yep.
Even if for the Bonnie life of him. He can't figure out why.
Well, this writer has his Trek down, though. Scotty aside, at least he tried to do a Scottish accent, but
sure,
he has definitely got the terminology down.
Yeah,
for the most part, he's got the characters down relatively well. We'll see more cool Kirk stuff later. Yeah, that definitely feels Kirk-like to me.
Like all the characters feel right, except for those individual nitpicky dialogue choices.
Yep, agreed. And I really like how we end this little section with that dramatic dialogue from Spock and this really cool shot of the Enterprise and just blackness of space.
An iconic shot, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. Looks like something you would have seen on a fade to commercial in TOS. So they are precisely nowhere. Anything else you want to say before we move along to the next?
No, I think
section?
We've basically exhausted it. I'm not going to attempt the sound effect of the red alert. So
that's okay.
Let's just go on.
You've got plenty more later to do.
Oh boy, do I!
Calling on you later. So, Spock goes on to explain that they are in an area of space where parallel universes meet, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
So Chekhov is reporting that there is some sort of small capsule that he's located that is floating right outside the ship. So Kirk and Spock go ahead down to, I guess, the shuttle bay and meet up with a female lieutenant by the name of Nova. And they put some spacesuits on and they board a little shuttle that they call an extra vehicular repair pod in order to go out and investigate. So Lieutenant Nova is talking to Captain Kirk about the power packs and the spacesuits, which have also stopped operating, just like the dilithium crystals had. And Spock makes a strange assumption, saying that assuming that the multiverse corollary is correct, there is no resistance to thought in a void. So he's basically saying that they should have some sort of psychic or telekinetic power. So
and I know we're not in the discussion area yet, but I'll allow that just because Spock, being a Vulcan, is a bit of a telepath.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
All right. So they get into this pod and Lieutenant Nova is able to pilot this pod using her mind, and they grab a hold of the cylinder and bring it back into the ship. They start to examine it. Dr. McCoy is taking a look at it, and it mysteriously begins to open, and out pops a duplicate Captain Kirk wearing different color clothing. So McCoy does a scan on him, and it turns out that he's identical to Captain Kirk in every single way. Kirk thinks that's impossible and says there can't be two beings exactly the same in the whole universe. And the duplicate Kirk replies, "How true, but you see, I am not from your universe. I'm from the universe before this one," which is an interesting statement in and of itself. So he explains that we get into the Gold Key flashback sequence.
Yes, finally.
Our typical flashback, where the duplicate Kirk is explaining that the universe doesn't just explode and collapse once, as alluded to earlier in the issue. It keeps doing it over and over again, and every time that it does, things in the universe happen exactly the same way each time, and that nobody has any choice in the matter. However, there's an exception to this rule. It's hard to read this, but there is apparently a single instant where a variation can happen each time the universe repeats, and that one single individual has control over this decision point. It's hard to wrap my head around that, but I had to read it many times to try to really understand what they were saying here. So
we'll get to it.
So the alternate Kirk goes on to say his universe had missed their opportunity to make this decision. So he volunteered himself to be placed in a form of suspended animation in the capsule that they found him in. So at the proper time, he could emerge from the tube and warn the only being in the universe who possesses free will and can make this choice. I know everybody sees where this is going.
Yeah.
But we're going to get there. So the duplicate Kirk demands that that he take over the Enterprise so that he can reach the being that has the ability to make that one single choice that can change the direction of the universe, and that our Captain Kirk take his place inside the capsule and go into suspended animation. Otherwise, the duplicate Kirk says that the universe is doomed to repeat itself into eternity. Of course, our Captain Kirk refuses and tells the devil to essentially shove it, and he doesn't believe that he's not in control of his own destiny. And so they continue to argue a little bit, and they finally get to a point where Kirk's double says, either you take my place in the cylinder or we have to fight to the death. What do you say, Captain? Are you game? Kirk, of course, says, I'm game.
Yeah.
And we're going to stop here because this is just wow. So on page 14. So just wow. Okay. So rewind back before
back to page 9.
This whole scratchy head thing. And Lieutenant Nova, I like this character.
Yeah, even though she's got an iffy name.
She does, but I really dig the fact that the guest star, if you will, in this issue, is a cool female officer. I think she's got some cool capabilities here. She's obviously got some command over her telepathic abilities that we'll see later on too. They go to her to help with the final resolution of this, and
and they end up relying on her technical expertise.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
She's never like a damsel in distress. She's competent and on her game, and that's like the most remarkable thing about her is that she's unremarkable, right? Like she's what you should expect of an officer who just happens to have, no Y chromosomes.
So yeah, I just wanted to point out that the fact that I thought it was really cool that we have another good female character in Gold Key. So they've been doing a pretty good job,
totally,
with the female characters lately. Fantastic stuff. So glad to see that. The spacesuits are pretty interesting looking, different than we've seen in Gold Key before.
Yeah, definitely an upgrade from before.
Yep.
I would say closer to what we had in the original series.
But they kind of look like the environmental suits a little bit,
right? Like as opposed to what we've seen previously in the Gold Key series.
Yes.
But also, like they're their own thing, and it also, I'm just going to throw this out there. They kind of look like an evolutionary step between the TOS spacesuits, or I should say EVA suits, and the TMP EVA suits.
Good call. Yes. Good call. They do look like a cross between, especially the texture on the sleeves and pants. Agreed. Yeah, I like them. The helmets are a little bit weird, but
a little.
They definitely do, and the backpacks look quite a bit like they're going towards the TMP spacesuit.
Yep.
And even the Wrath of Khan spacesuits, which are quite similar.
Totally. I do want to point out the hangar bay.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Just another part where Giolitti did his homework. He's got those little catwalky things.
Yep, and he's got little people in the windows.
Yeah, it looks.
It's fantastic.
It's 90% right.
Yeah, very well done. And I love that they went the extra mile and they give us a little piece of Gold Key canon. And I've always scratched my head and wonder how they repaired things like hull breaches from inside the ship. I love that they have this little pod with the little mechanical arms and hands that come out of it that's specifically made to repair the outside of the ship. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so these are basically performing the function of the work bees, which, if you ever looked at close-ups of the shuttle bay in TMP, you could see that there were actual docking ports for them on the hangar deck itself for work bees to dock.
Nice.
So these, what we're seeing here, presumably, are just the previous generation work bees.
I like it.
And I love Giolitti must have been influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey, because aside from the sweeped, pointed back of the work bees here, which I'm just going to call them work bees because that's the function that they have, they are exactly the EVA pods from the Discovery in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Kubrick film. Like, there is no way around it. The way that the arms come out, the big window on the front, the spherical, that's where he got it.
I was gonna say the same thing.
There's no way around it.
Absolutely right. But it's cool nonetheless.
Yes. I love it. I love it so much.
Another shot of it on the next page, page 10, the large panel in the middle. You have another cool shot.
Oh yeah.
Of that. The little pod with the mechanical arms on it. And let me just say, I love the last two panels on page 10 where you see the shuttlecraft doors opening, the light pouring out of the back of the Enterprise, and then you see the shuttlecraft, the little pod coming out of the back to retrieve the little cylinder.
Totally.
And the only thing I thought to myself was like, wow, that cylinder happens to be really close to the back. They almost didn't need to go out and get it. I mean, couldn't she have used her mental powers to just grab a hold of it and pull it in?
Yeah, I mean, if it was that close, you could have just all right, stop, let's open the doors and just back up the ship a few meters.
Put it in reverse and it'll just go right in. It'll go right in. And there's a cool shot of the interior of the pod on page 11,
where you even see the little catwalky thing.
I love it. And then there's a really cool shot of it grabbing a hold of the capsule in space. So Giolitti did some amazing space work in this and ship craft work. Just firing on all cylinders. Yeah,
I might even say this is probably Giolitti's best work that I've seen throughout this entire series.
So far, absolutely. I would have to agree with you on that. I mean, everything just feels spot on to me.
Yeah. And it's not just spot on, but really well done. Like, this is the sort of thing that if you saw this artwork in a story, a comic story for Star Trek that had been written, 5 years ago even, you would still say, "Oh yeah, no, that fits."
Definitely.
That's spot on.
Definitely, I would agree. And one thing I wasn't quite too sure on though, I can buy the fact that somehow they have telekinetic powers. Okay, I'm just kind of buy into that, and I'm gonna accept your explanation that Spock was able to key in on it because he has some telepathic ability normally.
Yeah.
But the thing that kind of threw me was that Spock is essentially saying that the reason why we don't have telekinetic powers in our own universe is because somehow the transmission of our thoughts or the abilities of our brain are impeded by something that doesn't exist in this parallel universe or this area of space.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. That's weird to me to think, what exactly is impeding is there some sort of a damper everywhere in our normal universe that just exists everywhere in space, on every planet, no matter where you happen to be.
Yeah, like thought is impeded by the presence of matter is a weird concept.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, I almost feel, because so on page 10, panel 2, Spock's lines are, assuming the multiverse corollary is correct, Captain, then there is no resistance to thought in a void, right? So we just covered that. But your will and these helmets should prove sufficient. And then you look at the art on the helmets, and they got these little wires coming out, and you kind of feel like maybe the point of these helmets in particular is that there's some sort of brain magic going on with them.
Yeah. Yes. No, I do see what you're saying, and that is alluded to here, and it is quasi-confirmed later in the issue, but not completely.
Yeah, because she's doing the telepresence on the pod.
Right, and yeah, she's holding the helmet, like she's holding the sides of the helmet. It implies that, in Spock's line about the helmet should prove sufficient. I get that, and that may be the case, that it's the helmet that's helping with it, but later on in the issue, you see multiple people are supposedly using this mental willpower without the helmet. So
yeah, but let's not reveal that.
Yeah,
card.
well, okay, fair enough. We'll hold the rest of this conversation until we get to that point. I love the fact that they're introducing another parallel universe that's not the mirror universe.
Yeah.
You see Kirk 2 pop out of the tube, and he is wearing different clothes. Well, the clothes are the same, but the colors of the clothes are different. They're not different clothes. Yes. He doesn't have facial hair, so he's not like evil Kirk. So it's not like Opposite Land.
Yeah.
It is another completely separate parallel universe where people are identical, but the clothing choices are different.
Yeah, and so he's the color choice is that he basically looks the same, except he's wearing a blue shirt and red pants.
Yes.
And
so I'm going to just go out on a limb and just say this right now, and feel free to shoot me down, but I believe that the colors of alternate Kirk's clothes completely disprove the theory that everything in the other in the repeating universe is exactly the same, because obviously it's not. Somebody chose different colors for those uniforms.
Yes.
So therefore, if everything happened exactly the same except for one choice, his uniform would be the exact same color as our Kirk's uniform.
Completely with you on that.
And there's other stuff that throws that theory out the window as well. Yeah. But that, to me, invalidates it right off the bat.
Right. Without question. But even though, I mean, let's be honest, the red and blue color scheme of him was obviously chosen because A, it's different.
Right.
And B, he would be easy to pick out.
Agreed. Absolutely.
You know,
they had to have a differentiator.
And because red and blue are like basic colors. So it would be cheap. But what it reminds me of, just because of the context of it, of him being a duplicate, I feel like there may be one listener at the very least who will understand this reference. And maybe you will too, but there was an issue of Superman, and I want to say it was in the 70s, but it might have been in the 60s, where Superman gets split into two, and it's Superman red and Superman blue. So he looks exactly the same, except one Superman is all red instead of blue and red, and the other Superman is blue instead of red and blue. You remember that one?
Vaguely.
Okay, so that is exactly what it made me think of, just because of the color choices, red and blue, and the fact that he's a duplicate. And I wonder, we'll never find this out. Who knows even who colored these? But I wonder if that influenced at all the choice to color Kirk blue and red?
Yeah, who knows? It's a good question. Because it's a different shade of blue. His shirt's a different shade of blue than the regular blue shirts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
which you can see in the exact same channel.
Yeah,
or
and
panel.
the pants are different than the red shirt reds.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit different than the red shirt reds. And I have to say, sorry, I'm not derailing your this part of the conversation, but I have to say I was wrong earlier. Dr. McCoy is actually named in this issue. He's named by alternate Kirk in panel 3 on page 12. So I was wrong. I missed that. So I apologize. But yeah.
It's okay. We'll burn you at the stake later.
Okay, fair enough. Well, try to drown me first. First.
All right. We'll get there.
Yeah. So, and also right underneath that, by the way, another interesting and very touching throwback to TOS. McCoy calls Kirk Jim. So that doesn't happen in Gold Key either. So another really great throwback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So very, very, very cool. Now we have this not too lengthy flashback. It's a one-pager. Pretty dialogue heavy, but again, there's another thing in alternate Kirk's description that seems to throw the one choice theory completely out the window in my mind, and that is the fact that he says in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the fourth panel on page number 13, you have these two lab-coated scientists. Yeah. And he was talking about how, every time it does, things happen exactly the same each time. Nobody has any choice no matter. The next panel, which has these two scientists in it, explains a deviation, which was, at least that was the theory, until someone came up with the figures proving there's a single instant of variation in each universe. We call this the free will theorem. So there were times where that didn't exist. Like that theory hadn't come up with yet. So there were obviously the universes had gone on and on and on and on and on until somebody came up with this theory, this free will theorem that, wait a minute, there is one choice that can be made.
Yeah, if I'm going to be the most forgiving that I can be, I would say look at the TNG episode Cause and Effect.
Mm-hmm.
Where the same events repeated over and over and over, and yet there was a little tiny bit of information that would carry over from one instance to the next, which,
I remember that,
of course, Data was able to recognize and then, avoid colliding with Fraser's ship.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe there's some kind of information that, each iteration of the universe scientists would slowly pick up on, and then finally the last one was the one where they finally figured it out, and it was the equivalent of Data looking up and seeing the 3 pips on Riker's collar and saying, "Oh, I get it, I should listen to him," like that. If I'm being the most forgiving I can be, it's that we have a precedent for that in Trek, even though it came out like 15 years after this.
Yep. Fair enough. We can go with it. There's plenty more that we can nitpick as we move on through this. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to point out before we move on to the part 2 of this comic?
Well, I do want to point out that I really like the artwork in this flashback, especially panel 3.
Yeah, that is pretty neat.
Which I thought, it's just really cool looking. It's for the readers who don't have it in front of them, it's all of the various crew members of the Enterprise, and they are sort of being split into 2. Except obviously it's not that they're being split into 2. It's he's just trying to visually represent that there are everyone that gets recreated in each universe. And it's just a really cool thing because it's all line art, and there's these circles going all throughout it, and it just looks cool. I love that.
Yeah, it's excellent.
But then on the very next panel, I have to wag my finger at Giolitti for putting this belt strap on this dude's lab coat.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lab coat, which I had to, I didn't have to buy it for chemistry class, but what am I going to take chemistry and not buy a lab coat?
Of course not.
Like, what kind of monster am I? There's no belt straps on lab coats. No, come on.
No, true. And I like the fact that it's two guys in lab coats that come up with a theory.
Right.
The free will theory. So the people who are pontificating on the theory of the universe itself and this repeating pattern that happens. Obviously they're aware of it, right? They're somehow aware that the universe keeps repeating and repeating. These two guys in lab coats, and they're trying to figure out if there's any kind of free will at all, right? Then they're sitting around in their lab coats, drawing diagrams on pieces of paper to come up with a free will theorem.
Right.
Just doesn't seem like the way that theory would have been arrived at.
Yeah. It's like he just told Giolitti, okay, draw two scientists doing science stuff.
But
not chemistry, more like physics.
Yeah, I would have preferred to see a couple of guys sitting in a library.
Yeah.
Or with big piles of books on the table, or I don't know, just
at least there weren't test tubes.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So we are about to move into the duel here between the two Kirks. And of course, this is starting part 2 of the comic. This is, there's the captain's log to catch us up. So I will read this because it actually kind of sort of adds a little bit of clarity to some things. So it says captain's log stardate 1702 ... Trapped in a timeless, placeless void inside the one piece of matter that exists from universe to universe, which I don't think was actually clear until they just said that.
Yeah.
I have been confronted by my own double. He claims to come from the previous universe, come here to warn the one being somewhere in the cosmos whose life is not predestined to make the right choice. Who that being is, where he is, and what is the right choice all remain a mystery. But all that matters now is the universe isn't big enough for both of us. One has to be left behind if any are to survive. Now, a little bit easier to understand what's going on here now with that little synopsis.
Yeah.
This page itself is quite interesting, and I'm gonna start reading through the story here in a second. But
yeah, let's come back to it because I fully agree.
Let's definitely come back to it. So, the two captains are meeting on the recreation deck. They're decked out in some space age fencing gear, and our Kirk chooses Mr. Spock as his second for this duel, and the duplicate Kirk refuses to name a second. So Spock offers the duplicate Kirk his choice of weapons, and the duplicate Kirk takes what he calls a laser torch, which appears to be a phaser, set on kill, but they don't call it a phaser, by the way, and then suddenly attacks Captain Kirk, our Captain Kirk, and Spock with his fencing foil, catching them pretty off guard. So Kirk is fending him off, and another red alert sounds. Sulu reports that over the Enterprise... Oh, by the way, I neglected to mention that the alternate Captain Kirk also chooses the Enterprise as one of his weapons, which befuddles Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock enough that they're able to be toppled by the alternate Kirk's saber. So we're under attack. Sulu reports that we're under attack from another Enterprise, and the duplicate Kirk exclaims that's his Enterprise that has been hidden there in that area of space by the scientists who put him in the capsule in the suspended animation because they anticipated that our Captain Kirk would refuse. So there's a lot more choice going on here than we originally were led to.
Right.
So alternate Kirk is able to control the second Enterprise with his mind. So the two start to duel with their foils, and the duplicate Kirk runs away. Our Captain Kirk orders Spock to go to the bridge and defend the Enterprise against the other Enterprise while he chases alternate Kirk. Sounds confusing.
Yes, it's like an inception of Enterprises.
Yes, Kirk fights a battle while they're running through the corridors of the ship. Spock is reporting over the intercom from the bridge that the duplicate Enterprise is maneuvering, but all he can do is rotate the shield modulation to try to fend off the phaser blast. So Kirk orders Spock to have Lieutenant Nova come to the helm of the ship and plug in her quote-unquote cybernetic helmet into the ship's guidance system. Spock warns them that the strain on the ship's sensors would be too great, and Captain Kirk insists. So while the fighting keeps going between the two Kirks, Kirk is ordering that all the crew members are to join hands and channel their mental energy through Spock and Nova. It works, and the Enterprise comes to life and is able to fight back against the other Enterprise. So we're going to stop right here. This is page 20 we're stopping on for everybody listening in and for Ian. So let's roll back to the fencing setup on page 15. So we're looking at the fencing scene here, and Duplicate Kirk says something that I found very interesting. He says they will duel in accordance with the Federation's Code of Honor. So the Federation has a code that governs dueling,
I guess,
or fighting in general. There's a code of honor that the Federation has that governs what they can and can't do.
Isn't dueling still legal here in America, except you can't kill anyone?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think I seem to recall something like that. But I mean, of course, there's a long history of that. Plus, it's in space, and then, but the telltale thing is that our Kirk says agreed without putting any notes on it or anything, meaning that he completely understands. Oh yeah, Federation's Code of Honor. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
So there's a code of honor that we don't know what the details of it are, but I thought it was very cool that it's kind of more gold key canon that they're adding, that this thing exists. Although they are saying they're fighting to the death, so I'm not sure what honor has to do with that.
It's a little iffy there, but can we just say though, the Kirk's quarters in this panel? Wow, Giolitti did it again.
Yeah, you even got the little decanter in the back there.
Yeah, the Saurian brandy bottle.
Yep. The seats, the chairs look good. The bed
with the diamond pattern even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the grill, even though it's not hexagonal, I'll forgive him for that.
Yeah.
It's still it's obviously a grill. He got it.
Yep. Very well done. Very well done. The fencing pads look a little strange.
Yeah, they look almost like bad Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles costumes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hockey pads almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're still better than Nanbojutsu. So moving on.
I don't understand this duel at all.
What I really wonder is, what is the deal with the second?
I don't know. They don't explore that.
Yeah.
At all.
Kirk waves it and Spock is his second. What does that even mean?
I have no clue what that means.
That one panel is the only time they even talk about it.
Yeah. Not sure. We'll have to look up the rules of dueling and see what seconds are supposed to mean.
Yeah.
One thing that I just don't understand about this duel, Ian. I don't get it. They both have phasers set to kill. Why don't they just shoot at each other?
Right.
Why are they even bothering with the foils and the fencing gear? I just don't get it. Just as soon as you had the phaser in your hand, point it at the other guy and pull the trigger. Fight over.
Yeah. Yeah. Indiana Jones didn't,
Oh, what a great scene that was, right? Yeah.
Right. When he's
shoot him.
The guy comes at him with the sword and he's like, oh, screw this. And then he just shoots him.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I don't.
This is not rocket science.
No.
This isn't even warp theoretical physics. This is just a duel with a gun and a sword. Pick one.
Yeah, and I understand that you're going for the TOS, fisticuffs action sequence thing, and I get that. That's totally cool. Yeah. I really wish though that they had not brought the phasers into it at all. Like maybe that was the code of honor. Like they couldn't use phasers. They had to use physical weapons, right? Like swords and blunt objects and their fists and their bodies.
So then just leave the phasers out of it.
Right. That would have made a lot more sense because you both of them have phasers in their hands. So I can't imagine any scenario in which either one of them would opt not to use the phaser in a fight to the death. I just don't see that happening. But anyway.
Yeah. Plus, one thing that was really cool though was the phasers. Like we noticed last issue, Giolitti seemed to finally get the phaser type 2s down.
Oh yeah.
And here especially we get what is almost a close-up of one in panel 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks right down to the dial on the side and the dial on the back. They look good. They're still pink, but
Yep. They still look. They look.
At least they're consistent.
Good. Yes, absolutely. And you also got some other angles on Kirk's quarters in here, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
And they all look really neat. I like them all. Very, very, very good stuff.
Absolutely.
The technical terms. I love that they brought in rotating the shields.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Totally. Can I insert one thing right before you go into that?
Of course.
So one last thing, though, it just got a little bit under my skin, was when alternate Kirk says on guard as opposed to
on guard.
On guard, like en guard, like the French phrase or Spanish phrase, sorry.
Yeah.
Which means in, not on.
Yep.
It just so lazy. But moving on.
Yes. Oh yes. So a couple other things that I did mention already, the rotating shields. I love that. That's obviously lends itself to the idea that the author really, really, really does know his Trek, as we assumed he does because he's been so spot on so far. But I love that they had that piece in there. That's great. And I also really like the author's handle on I want how to put this into words. The classic TOS Kirk fight scenes while he's talking to people elsewhere on the ship during the fight, like still giving orders.
Oh yeah.
And commanding the ship through communications, through wall boxes and whatnot, while he's in the middle of fighting. And there's a really great one here on page 17, the last panel, where Sulu is saying, "Captain, are you there? We're awaiting your orders." And Kirk responds, "I'm engaged at the moment." So there's even that little TOS humor moment inserted in there. So fantastic. Yeah. I love it. This may be the most TOS like Gold Key we've seen so far from the art and the writing standpoint.
Absolutely. Although I will say that, shouldn't someone else have had the con and been able to?
I thought that's why Spock was up there.
Make those maneuvers, yeah. But maybe he couldn't because he was the second, whatever that means.
I don't know. But I thought that's why he sent Spock to the bridge.
Yeah, that's my only nitpick. But otherwise, I am in complete agreement with you that I love that.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. So the reveal of Nova's cybernetic helmet. I thought that was a big reveal. I thought that explained a lot until all the other people were joining hands and channeling their energy without these helmets on. I don't get it. So
and this was 10 years before the We Are the World video.
So they're all in a circle locking hands on the bridge.
And there's no Paul McCartney, there's no Michael Jackson. It's just weird.
Yeah, and I don't know why Kirk was the one that came up with the idea for them to do that. I would have thought Spock or Lieutenant Nova would have been the right one to come up with the idea that everyone join their bodies and use their powers. Like, it just seems strange that Kirk would be the one.
Yeah, in fact, it would have been like just in terms of the flow of the story, it would have been smoother if it had been Nova suggesting that rather than Kirk.
Agreed.
Because we already had so much of Kirk's dialogue on the previous page that just getting a break from that, it just would have felt better, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I mean, I guess we have to give them one or two little snafus in there.
Sure.
You know, we always have to rewrite.
It's still Gold Key.
Yeah, still Gold Key. We have to rewrite these a little bit, but And I said earlier that I was going to have you do some of these sound effects, and I was waiting for this one particular page with this one particular sound effect on it, and I want to hear how you interpret some of these sound effects on page 20 on the final panel with the two Enterprise ships flying towards each other there.
See, but there's so many sound effects. Can I just run through them all in this section?
Yeah, there's one in particular. I think you can tell which one it is that I want to know how you're going to sound that out, but feel free to do all of them if you wish.
Okay, so let's scroll back here to page 16.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the first clash of the foils.
Oh, yes.
And we've got a zzz,
that's a good one,
which sounds like a door opening up almost.
Mm.
Then we've got vroom, and then the red alert, which I'm not going to do because I said I previously would not do it.
Understood.
And then next page we've got kazing.
That's a classic.
Yeah. And then as the other Enterprise fires on our wonderful Enterprise, we've got zap, zap.
So you got like the sizzle of the phaser and then the zap sound.
Yep.
Nice.
It's so good. And then on the next page, sharoosh, which is apparently the sound of a swing of the foil.
Mm-hmm.
And then zwoosh. And then I just want to point out on the next page after that, or the next panel after that, rather, what a great corridor that is. Even got the A-frame.
Absolutely excellent corridor. Excellent.
Yeah, totally. But moving on to the next page.
Look at the captain's chair. The close-up of the captain's chair that Spock is sitting in looks really great, too.
It really, really did. It's just, there's so many examples of like, just, Giolitti, man, he's my boy.
Killing it.
And so then moving on to the next page, we've got frizz, bzz, whamp.
Yeah, whamp. That's a neat one.
With two P's. And then fizz. And then
fap. I don't know about
might
fap.
Be a little, that might be a little ping pong there.
Yeah.
But then the page that you were waiting for, where of course we have zoom.
That's an easy one.
Which is a sound effect apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And then zoosh.
Yep.
Zooj.
I don't know what zooj is. That's the one I was waiting for.
Yeah. I kind of interpreted it as like Captain Kruge, like from Star Trek 3. But and then of course finally a zip,
yeah,
which is apparently the sound of someone on the Enterprise zipping their fly back up.
I don't know. I mean, I get the zoom. That's great. I even get the zoosh. That I can even get that. That's those are obviously motion sounds. Zip.
Right.
For a ship flying through space, I don't know if I get zip. Maybe.
Right, especially because it's like a zip.
It sounds like a motorcycle or something, right? Or a small moped. But zooj was the one that I didn't get. Zooge. I just didn't get what that was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Maybe they just.
Well, it's the sound of plot.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Oh man! So we're gonna continue on to the conclusion of this.
Yeah.
This is a very, very interesting and head scratching conclusion in my mind. So Kirk is chasing his double through the ship and tracks him down to engineering, where he discovers that Mr. Scott has been bound and gagged. So our Kirk attempts to free him, but the duplicate Kirk sneaks up behind him and knocks him down, holds his foil to our Kirk's throat, and asks if he will reconsider the offer to take his place in the stasis chamber and allow duplicate Kirk to take command of the Enterprise. So Kirk yells out to Mr. Spock to drop the shields, and as the ship begins to shudder, the duplicate Kirk is off balance, and our Kirk takes his phaser and holds the alternate Kirk at gunpoint. So duplicate Kirk is shouting for our Kirk to kill him. Our Kirk pulls the trigger, and the duplicate Kirk falls to the floor, unconscious. So just as he does that, the second Enterprise disappears. Kirk explains to Mr. Scott that he had his phaser set to stun, not to kill. So he didn't intend to ever kill the duplicate Kirk. So duplicate Kirk is stuck back into the cylinder and sent out into space to drift around again. For what purpose, I have no idea. So
it's his way.
Yeah. So a little bit of a conversation ensues between Kirk and Spock, where Spock says that he estimates that they will never know if duplicate Kirk was actually who he claimed to be. And there's a little bit of a question from McCoy, where McCoy says, then there very well might have been a man in our universe who held the key to the future. And just then a ghost-like image, or projection that Spock calls it, of the other Kirk, the duplicate Kirk, appears in the room and proceeds to speak to our Captain Kirk. He says...
Yeah.
I sigh. You were the man with free will, Captain, and the moment came when you decided not to kill me. You've made your choice, and now I salute you. And then the image disappears. So, okay. So our Captain Kirk orders the crew to join hands again, and the crew funnels their mental energy, and the Enterprise is hurled clear of the void in space where they were held and heads back to the nearest star base. Kirk asks Mr. Spock if it's possible that everything that has happened in the universe has been done before. Spock answers, not only is it possible, Captain, it's highly probable. Kirk says, then why do it at all? Spock replies, do we have any choice, Captain? And that is the end of the issue. It's a very contemplative moment. But we'll talk about it a little bit here.
Yeah, basically all he's saying there is all this has happened before, and all this will happen again.
We've heard this before. It's the age-old argument, right? It's the age-old argument between predestination and free will, right?
Yeah.
What's the truth? Is everything happening because it's meant to happen and we have no control over it? Or are we actually making choices and guiding ourselves through our own lives? The age-old argument.
Yeah, and then eventually we're just going to get back to Earth in 1980.
Oh, God.
That was a deep cut there.
That was a very deep cut. So, now, I like this issue.
Yeah.
But my biggest gripe, and I'm not giving an essential vote yet because we're still talking about this issue. My biggest gripe is in the history of the universe, right? I have a huge problem with Captain Kirk being the one person that has that ultimate choice that he can make.
Yes.
That to me seems so absolutely far-fetched out of the... I can't even imagine how many living beings exist from the time the universe begins to the time that it collapses again, and it just so happens to be Captain freaking Kirk that has the choice. He's the only one with free will.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like the kind of thing that William Shatner would have come up with in one of his Star Trek books.
Absolutely.
Right? Where suddenly, like, I don't know if anyone's read them, but like, after Kirk dies, like he's resurrected, and then there's like the Borg and Spock, there's so much ego in those books, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I love me some William Shatner, like,
oh, me too,
but boy, it just feels like really,
yeah. I don't know. It felt I felt really, really disconnected from the story at that point. I really wish they would have left it where we didn't know who it was that had the free will, and we didn't know.
Yeah, there's no ghost thingy Kirk.
Yeah. That really just kind of flipped the story for me. The projection
or a transmission.
Yeah, the projected Kirk. And I take issue with the fact that the one decision that Kirk was supposed to make, the free will decision, was not to kill the double. So what effect?
Yeah.
What effect does this choice have on the universe? I don't get it.
Right, is because okay, let's follow this through. Let's think this through. So, if the choice was that every time there was a new universe, the Kirk from the previous universe showed up to challenge Kirk to a duel to the death, and
right, because everything up to that point was
identical,
predestined.
Right? And so
there was no choice there.
And so presumably in all of the previous universes, however many there may have been, the new Kirk killed the old Kirk.
Yep.
Then what about the first iteration of the universe, where there was no previous universe from which a Kirk could have come and challenged the new Kirk to a duel and
exactly
all that, right? Like
so many holes in this.
Plus, like, why is that the choice?
I know, that's what I mean. It doesn't make sense to me, and I don't. And not only does the choice itself not make sense, I don't know how the outcome of that duel either way affects anything.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, why is that the choice? Why is that the thing that the entire universe and all future universes will hinge upon?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and I mean, I could see it. I mean, there's like, look at the time paradox in, well, not necessarily, but in First Contact.
Sure.
So the Borg stop Zefram Cochrane from flying his warp ship and being contacted by the Vulcans, right? So that changes a significant event in the universe, and therefore changes the direction of not only humankind, but every other race and every event that came in the universe after that that we had a part in, right? But this doesn't seem to have any consequence or connection with anything else that's going on in the universe at all.
Yeah, because if the choice is up to Kirk, then that means that it's up to Kirk whether or not he kills or doesn't kill the previous Kirk. It's not. It can't be that the previous Kirk kills the new Kirk and takes over.
Right.
Because then that takes the choice out of new Kirk's hands.
Exactly.
And all the evidence that we have points to it's the new Kirk's choice that's the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it just doesn't make sense, right? Like,
no, it doesn't make sense at all.
If he had killed him, they'd still probably just put his body back in the tube and throw him out the airlock, So
what the alternate Kirk is essentially saying is he missed his opportunity to make the right choice. So that means he killed the alternate Kirk in his universe and then climbed into the tube and was jettisoned into space to wait for himself to be the alternate Kirk.
So maybe that's like the prime Kirk. Like the first Kirk.
Mm-hmm. So now you see, but it's still, I mean, okay, great, we figured that part out, but I still don't understand what the decision has to do with anything.
Right, no. Yeah, that part doesn't make any sense at all. But I will say that the panel where Kirk shoots him, I thought at first, and I'm talking about the last panel on page 22.
Yep.
I thought, especially because of the sound effect, which...
Yep. I know where you're going.
It's free.
Because I went there too.
Right. Like, I thought it meant that, like, his phaser just crapped out when he was going to shoot him.
That's exactly what I thought too. Exactly what I thought.
Right. But then the next panel, he's out cold, and it's obvious that he stunned him. And I almost feel like, had there been that kind of Deus Ex Machina where, oh my God, my phaser that I was going to fire on him for no particular reason, failed, that would have been the thing to change history. But even then, that would have still been just head scratchy.
Yeah.
I will say though this, Kirk, when he's down on the ground and old Kirk has the foil to his chest and he's ready to run him through, and for some reason he doesn't just do it. I love that he says, Spock, drop your shields, because it's a callback to, in the previous page, or previous 2 pages, well, even more than that, like the Enterprise is getting hammered by this duplicate Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you lower the shields, that means the ship is going to actually shake when it gets fired. And so he's in this position where all he has to do is just say, hey, drop the shields. And that's enough to throw old Kirk off of his feet and get him out of his sort of death position.
Actually.
Yeah, that was a really, really Kirkian move.
It absolutely was. And that was one of the things I was alluding to earlier when I said there were some great Kirk moments.
Yeah.
In this. So that, the author absolutely had his hands on all of these characters for the most part. I think very, very well written issue. Nitpicks with the decision here, the choice aside, it did feel really TOS to me. I could definitely see this being a TOS episode.
Yeah.
In just about every single way. I aside from the special effects that they probably wouldn't have been able to do.
Sure.
But it more than almost every other Gold Key for the most part. I think this one embodies the original series the best so far.
I would agree. And that includes even the We Are the World video that they do at the end.
Oh, jeez, you and that We Are the World.
We are the world.
No, I agree.
Right, because it smacks of what was that episode with the Klingons on it, and they take over the Enterprise, and then they find out that like the creature lives on negative energy, and so they laugh it off of the ship. And
they have to laugh it off, and they had the kumbaya moment at the end.
Right. It completely smacks of that.
Yep. Absolutely does. It absolutely does. Great analogy. I like that. That really even ties it back to TOS even more.
Yeah.
And even the 3-way conversation, the short 3-way conversation at the end with Kirk, McCoy, and Spock. That's the way a lot of TOS episodes ended.
Yeah, it absolutely did.
Not necessarily with the downers, but definitely with the 3 of them talking, and usually with a comedic moment later on.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, and because it's also like we've criticized a lot of the previous issues of Gold Key for the endings being very abrupt.
Mm-hmm. We have,
and this may be the first one where they actually get a coda after the climax.
Excellent call. Yep, you're right. It wasn't an abrupt wrap up. They actually ended it like a TOS episode would have ended.
Yeah.
Really great stuff.
And there's one last thing. It's just an art thing, but page 24, the big panel of the bridge with everyone lining up for the We Are the World video.
Mm-hmm.
You notice just off of the open turbolift door, for some reason there's like 15 people in the turbolift. There's another door, and I had noticed earlier in the issue when you mentioned that one shot that we rarely get of the bridge.
Yep.
So I was thinking back to the animated series, and one of the things that they did in the animated series that was actually good was that they put another door to the left of the view screen. And in that shot that you were talking about, it wasn't there. But in this panel, apparently it was just moved. And so maybe it was just a slightly different bridge module. I don't know.
Oh, there you go.
But that was kind of a nice touch. Like, because there should be more than one door on the bridge.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, one more. Yeah, you get a different egress in case the turbo lift is out. Mm-hmm. There's still a way to get off the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like we always do at the end of these, we are going to talk about whether we consider this issue essential or not. And again, restating it, but it's not about whether or not we like the issue, or we have complaints about the issue, or we find things that we don't understand. It's more about what does this issue bring to the Star Trek universe. And I think by virtue of that line itself, what does it bring to the Star Trek universe? This issue brings quite a bit, I think, to the Gold Key Star Trek universe. We went over a lot of this already. One, I mean, the repair pod ship. Yeah. I love that. That's how they repair the outside of the ship. Great stuff there. Federation Code of Honor that governs fighting, I guess. All the crew is finally present and accounted for.
All of them.
Yep, all of them. We get introduced to another parallel universe that's not the mirror universe, which is great. Resort planet Lido. We got another resort planet we go to. The Enterprise has a recreation deck. I mean, a lot of stuff in this Gold Key that makes it worthwhile and brings new things to the Trek universe, even though, of course, we understand this is not considered official canon. Sure. But still, if you're looking for cool stuff that authors have brought to the Trek universe that was officially sanctioned by the studio, this issue has a lot to offer.
So, what's your rating?
Oh, essential by all means.
we have to hear the word.
Oh, yes. Good. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I hadn't said it.
Yeah, I was waiting for it. Yeah, and, I have to agree. I'm casting an essential vote on this one, too. Not just for all of the reasons which you said, which I completely agree with, but because, when I cast an essential vote, I'm also doing so slightly differently than just a tad differently than you've been doing for the rest of the series before I joined up, which is that I think of this in terms of is this one that you should read, right? Is it essential? If you were going to, it's kind of everyone has, for example, their episodes of any given series that they'll just skip over. Drozen aside, a lot of people would just skip over Catspaw, for example, or Move Along Home on Deep Space Nine, stuff like that, right? The feel of this issue was so Star Trek, and importantly, it was the most Star Trek feeling issue that I think maybe we've even read so far. And because of that, I would say if you were doing a read through of the Gold Key comics and you were like, well, maybe the vegetable people I could toss out, right?
Yeah.
This one would have to be on your read list. It would have to be. For sure. You would be missing out on what Gold Key has to offer if you didn't read this one. So for all the reasons that you said and that point that I just made, I'm casting my essential vote.
Excellent. That's great. I love double essentials. I do love contentious votes, but sure. I love double essentials too, because that means that this whatever episode we were watching or whatever issue we were reading has value, and I love that. I think that's great. And this has been a long episode, listeners. Thanks for sticking with us. This is a little longer than our usual ones, so I think we crested the 2-hour mark here.
Yep.
So we'll be merciful and quick with the ending.
Nice reference.
Yeah. You can find us at thetricordertransmissions.com, facebook.com/the Tricorder Transmissions, and TTT_pod on Twitter. And you can find me at J_Benj on Twitter, J_BENJ on Twitter if you want to hit me up personally. And Ian, where can they find you?
On Twitter at Ian128K, as in 128 kilobytes. That's it.
Like the sequel to the Commodore 64.
Right. Or the amount of RAM in the original 1984 Macintosh.
Ah, nice. So, everybody out there, thank you so much, of course, for listening. As always, we really, really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. And if you could, jump over to iTunes if you haven't done it.
Yes, please.
Leave us a quick review or just stars. If you want to just do stars, if you don't want to write anything, that's fine. We appreciate some more reviews on iTunes. Helps us build our audience and bring in new people to the fold.
Yeah.
Discoverability.
And I'll even throw this one. I didn't discuss this with you before, but I think that whoever writes one that just strikes our fancy, we'll just read it on the air.
Oh, for sure. Yep. We've done it in the past a long time ago, and we can always do it again. And plus, we'd love to hear from you on social media. If you mention anything you want us to talk about on social media, or if you have a point that you want us to bring up and talk about, we'd love to do that too.
Yeah.
So feel free.
We're totally open to follow-up discussions also. Like, don't believe that the conversation of each episode has to be completely tied to the issue or episode at hand. Like, we're completely up for discussing points that have been raised before on previous episodes.
Oh, absolutely. So, all right, guys. Like I said, we've crested the 2-hour mark, so we're going to be merciful and let you go. Thanks a lot for listening. And Ian, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always.
You too, Jeff.
All right. Take it easy, everybody. And we'll see you next time on the Tricorder Transmissions. Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.